Feels like we're all holding our breath. Sorry. Okay.
Totally. Are we going to stay on a side panel for the whole thing? Probably not, right?
I think the view sort of depends on how you've set it up. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah. Looks like we're having some folks show up. Hello, everyone. Okay, it's 11 o'clock, and so I'm going to welcome you all to this session of the Utah Poetry Festival for 2023, Encountering the Wild. I'm Lisa Bickmore, and I'm the Poet Laureate of the state of Utah. Before I introduce the moderator of this panel, Nancy Tackett, I want to acknowledge and give thanks to Utah Humanities and the Division of Arts and Museums who have provided funding and support for the festival. And I also want to thank Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks for their underwriting of arts and humanities activities, including this festival. I want to personally thank the planners and organizers of the festival who worked with me, Laura Stott-Rogers, Nancy Tackett, Michael Lavers, Kara Vandegraff, Cindy King, and Danielle Dubrasky. Special thanks to Emily Grubby of Utah Humanities, who has provided the technical power and know-how behind this program. And without the efforts and support of all of these agencies and people, this festival would not be possible. I'm going to tell you that if you have questions for the panel, we are anxious to have you ask them. So use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Nancy will keep an eye on those, as will I. So we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Now I'm going to introduce Nancy, who is a poet who loves wild landscapes. In her latest collection, Dearest Water, she explores our connection to both land and water. The poet Derek Sheffield, and editor of terrain.org, writes, "Not enough are we guttural or loving. We read here and feel the truth of it in our animal bodies." In Dearest Water, Nancy Tackett explores a wide range of relationships, from the pickles and mazes of the human family to the shine of scorpions and terrible miracle of a bear's snout. Tackett writes in a rich music that would conjure the wonder in every moment in each of us of being part of the living earth. She's received many poetry awards, including a Pushcart Prize, the Juniper Prize, and the 2018 and 2016 15 Bites Book Award. She's an avid mushroom forager, an OK watercolorist trying to learn more, and a daily swimmer. Nancy, I'm going to turn the Zoom over to you so that you can introduce the panelists and get started.
Hey, thank you, Lisa. And thanks so much to our sponsors, and thank you all for coming out today. I'd like to introduce our panelists, Rob Carney, Olivia Dudding, Margaret Pettis, and Michael Souter, all chosen to be on this panel because their writing reflects the wild, and they have taught about the wild in their classes. So let me read their bios to you. Quite an illustrious group here. Olivia Dudding Rodriguez is an Appalachia-grown poet, storyteller, facilitator, and devoted celebrant from southeastern Ohio who has made her home in the hills of eastern Utah. Her writing celebrates the complexities of heritage, identity, and the symbiosis of place and community. She was a fellow of the 2019 cohort of the Heart of It, founded by Desiree Dalla Giacomo, and has returned to the Heart of It for the last 3 years as an alumni in residence and co-facilitator. She has written with Nan Seymour and the River Writers, and she is part of our Helpers Book Cliff Poets. Rob Carney is the author of the flash essay collection Accidental Gardens, Stormbird Press 2021, and 8 books of poems, most recently Call and Response, Black Lawrence Press 2021, and the Book of Sharks, same publisher 2018, which also won the 15 Bites Book Award. He's a recipient of the Milton Kessler Memorial Prize in Poetry, the Robin Jeffers Torhouse Foundation Award for Poetry, and he is a featured contributor to Terrain.org, and his work has appeared in dozens of journals. He and his family live in Salt Lake City. Michael Sauter is a poet and professor of English. He holds a PhD from the University of Michigan, an MFA from Georgia State, and a JD from the University of Washington. He is also an adjunct faculty member in the Yoga Studies program and an affiliated faculty member of the Religious Studies program. His books include poetry collections The Empty Boat, which won the T.S. Eliot Award, House Under the Moon, and A Calendar of Crows, New Michigan Press Award. His scholarly study, Whitman's Ecstatic Union, was published by Routledge. And Margaret Pettis taught English for 41 years and also taught to inmates. She wrote the chapbook in a driftwood ring during the years she packed mules as a wilderness ranger for the U.S. Forest Service. She's published several books, including the Utah State Poetry Society book called Chokecherry Rain. She also writes novels, and she has won several awards for her writing. Co-founder, editor, and resident poet of the High Uintas Preservation Council and the Utah Wilderness Association, Margaret has a deep love for Utah's wild places and critters. So welcome, everybody. I wanted to just mention that to our audience, who came in a little bit later, that there is a Q&A little button down below this screen that you can use to ask questions. And so we hope you do. And I hope the audience enjoys this discussion, because it's about the hows and whys of poets and how they've responded to write about the human connection and or reaction to wild place, animals, and why they write it. I think the word wild can mean many things, so maybe we'll get into that, those definitions as well. So I just wanted to ask you, where and when did your relationship with nature begin? Was it as a young child, or was it later in life? So whoever wants to go.
I'll go.
Sorry, go
Okay.
ahead.
Oh, yeah, we can just jump in at any time. So feel free.
I grew up in Northern California, and I took every opportunity to get away from my parents. So as a kid, I had horses, and a horse is a wonderful reason and a place a companion to get away. And we lived out in ranch country, so I would ride frequently down to the Feather River, and just the mere fact of being away from talking and the family dynamics, it focused me completely in the world that was around me, and not that chatter voice of Nick as a child, a teenager, whatever. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just constant. And and so that's where my connection was, through horses and through just long rides all day long down into a terrain that was not groomed like all the orchards around our house, but it was through thickets, and it was river, and it was unknown, and you'd see foxes, and you'd see things that everyone said was wild and kind of scary, they said, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're a horse person, and you knew where the horse could go and where it couldn't, right?
Right.
That sounds wonderful. Anybody else?
Yeah, I didn't grow up in Utah either. I mean, I've lived here longer than any other place I've ever lived, but I grew up in the Northwest in Washington State. So for me, the connection starts with Puget Sound and Mount Rainier. And when I was young, I mean, even until high school, I thought back east meant Spokane. So, to me, it's that corner, the Northwest, the rain, the trees, the crows, the fog, Puget Sound, Mount Rainier, especially. And, I didn't know that there were people who couldn't see that. It just seemed like that was the whole world. I mean, those are pretty dominant, giant things, and they made an impact from the time that I was little.
Mm. Great.
I'll jump in. So
Uh-huh.
just want to thank the panel for inviting me on. I was kind of a late addition. Just wanted to add that. From a very early age, I had like a real love of nature's beauty. And I remember the first house we lived in when I was a kid in Ohio. We left this house when I was in kindergarten, but I always used to be like the first person awake, and I would climb this maple tree in the front yard. And it's like, I must have been like 5 years old. And like today, like parents like would never let you do that. But anyway, I just had this like real love of the beauty. I used to love to be up there among the maple leaves. And anyway, my dad was a real outdoors person. And so he always, when we moved, he always bought a house that like bordered a forest or some woods or something. And so really grew up playing in the woods and in the forest. And then in college, like, a lot of us, I fell in love with nature writers. Thoreau was like my first guru. And I ended up going to law school, but it was really through the power of poetry and these transcendentalist writers that kind of called me back from that career back into the world of literature and poetry. So anyway, super grateful for all of that.
I'll tell you what, I was also a kid from Ohio. What are the odds of that? I grew up about 30 minutes from the Ohio River and the West Virginia border. If you want to know specifically where, there's a little part of the Ohio River that looks like a boot. And if you can find that, then you're in the right neighborhood. So I grew up out there, and I feel like I grew this affinity for the wild because there really was nothing else. I lived about 30 minutes from just about anywhere. So we got very comfortable and familiar with finding ways to play out in trees. And we had an apple grove and a little farmhouse. And yeah, how do you not start with a love story like that to find yourself?
Yeah.
Sounds idyllic.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. I mean, basically, all of you are saying that you've loved nature since the time you were young, and it's because you got to be out by yourself, you're independent. Margaret, you rode your horse, your family didn't know where you were. But,
Right. Yes.
and that's interesting because some people come to it later on in life. But I was thinking too how children nowadays have it a little bit more difficult unless we go with them, or we have to make sure they're safe, and so many things going on in the world. Technology has changed things with kids, and it's tougher. But I was wondering what you thought of the phrase encountering the wild, which is pretty general. But in your poetry or others' poetry, what does that mean to you, that phrase?
I mean, I'll hop right back in.
Okay.
Don't mind.
Please do.
I have lived in rural places nearly my whole life, and it astounds me to recognize that there are different relationships to place. And I feel like for me, being in rural space or being in wild space is a way to see myself reflected and to learn about myself in maybe a language outside of words. I'd love to share just a brief quote that I really love from Ross Gay, who is one of my favorite poets. He has this really great thing to say in his Book of Delights, which is a book of essays. He says, among the most beautiful things I've ever heard anyone say came from my student Bethany, talking about her pedagogical aspirations or ethos, how she wanted to be as a teacher and what she wanted her classrooms to be. What if we joined our wildernesses together? Sit with that for a moment, that the body, the life might carry a wilderness, an unexpected territory, and that yours and mine might somewhere, somehow meet, might even join. And what if the wilderness, perhaps the densest wild there is, thickets, bogs, swamps, uncrossable ravines and rivers, have I made the metaphor clear, is our sorrow or the intolerable? It astonishes me sometimes, no, often, how every person I get to know, everyone, regardless of everything, in which I mean everything, lives with some profound personal sorrow. Everyone, regardless, always, everything, not to mention the existential sorrow, which we all might be afflicted with, which is that we love will soon be annihilated, which sounds more dramatic than it might. Let me just say dead. In this sorrow of which our impending being no more might be the foundation, the great wilderness. Is sorrow the true wild? And if it is, and if we join them, your wild to mine, what's that? For joining two is a kind of annihilation. I'm saying, what if it is joy? And just briefly, I want to say, I feel like the parts of myself that I think are least accessible to myself are, I find also what people relate to the most in my writing and a kind of wildness. Yeah.
Great. Okay.
I'll jump in. So when I think of this phrase, encountering the wild, I mean, I like to think of this notion of the one life that includes, all living beings of the planet, to have a kind of planetary consciousness, including humans, in that idea of this one life. But at the same time, I do feel like there's something really unique and fulfilling and nurturing when we leave the built world, the human built world, and go out into what we call nature, because we experience a kind of solitude that in the wild that I feel like is revolutionary, because it's outside of the consumerist culture and the whole capitalist culture. And it gives us an opportunity for a deep kind of spiritual fulfillment that's not really dictated by the, whole marketing culture that we're surrounded by all the time. And so I actually see solitude and going out into the non-human world as liberating in that way and revolutionary.
I think it's also a lot to do with mystery. Michael, maybe just to add another avenue to what you were saying, that I think of kayaking, putting your kayak in, and it's a surprise. It's an unknown around every bend. What is to the right will not be to the right tomorrow. What you see is always new and minimalizes your effect in your control, and you can't do anything about it. You just absorb it and love it. And sometimes, maybe in awe is fear. The
sublime.
I've spent a lot of time in bear country, of going looking for bears, and there has to be a healthy fear in that relationship, respect. So the mystery is also really important, I think, in encountering the wild. And something I've noticed is this trend, like you were saying, Nancy, of parents perhaps being the old term helicopter parents or whatever, you're managing every moment instead of just letting them kids discover in the wonder of the moment. I'm seeing more and more people are building these inane cairns everywhere they go. It's like, I go 2 feet, I build a rock sculpture. I go 2 feet, I build something. No. Please stop that. That's just putting more of a marked path through the mystery. And
I think those are all good words: joy and love and awe and revolution and mystery. I'd just add 3: curiosity, reverence, and wow. And sometimes the wow, like to echo, is a surprise. For instance, up in the panhandle of Idaho, I did see a bear, since bears were brought up. And what that bear was doing was using a new road that had just had gravel laid on it to lie down in the sun and rock back and forth, scratching its back. So our road was a bear's back scratcher.
That's awesome. I also wanted to respond to what you said, Margaret, that I liked how you brought in rowing and kayaking, because, I remember that the Greeks said that poetry came from rowing. And, any kind of rhythmical activity, I think, promotes that sense of rhythm in our words. And walking is the same, hiking, walking. And I noticed in one of the question and answers, somebody asked about appreciating the beauty of nature, and that's an ancient subject in poetry, and how do you keep it fresh? And I think, just going back to what you guys are saying, I think it comes from just the specificity. And like you say, you go around every bend and there's something totally new. I always share with my students a quote from Emerson, who said that, every view of nature is a thing complete, a picture which has never been seen before and will never be seen again. And so, if you walk out in your front yard, that's completely different than it has ever looked ever before, and completely different than it will ever look again. And I think that's where we get our freshness and originality and things like that.
Oh, those are wonderful answers. Thank you. What do you think that encountering the wild could mean for people who live in densely urban places? In other words, do you have to live and to be in a wild place in order to find the wild? For example, I consider Utah to be, fairly wild. You can camp wherever you want. Well, that's changing a little bit, but you can get back into some really, really remote places and not see another person, which is, gosh, I don't know any other state that has what we have in Utah. But considering people who live in cities, what might they consider encountering the wild to mean for them?
I think every city still has birds, and they are wild. But more than that, there's photography, there's books. They feed your own imagination, which you begin with, and you don't. Even if you live in the city, it's not like you're cut off from those. And when I was a kid, I didn't live anywhere near where the Jacques Cousteau Society was filming their scuba and explorations, but I felt like that's what I want to do. I want to be in the Jacques Cousteau Society. So even then, when there were very few and scattered shows about it, that was exciting. And shows are on all the time now. So people have access. All they have to do is feel.
I think it's your brain, right, that finds the wild. If you're open, you find it. You could find it in any park, in your backyard. You talked about Michael climbing the maple tree, and you find it. Once you're up on the branch, your perspective changes on the entire world. You're of the tree. You're not the kid who lives in the house anymore. Or maybe you are. It's up to your brain what you do. When I was a kid, my main toy was a spoon. I love to dig in the mud. I'd take the hose out, turn the dirt into mud, build little huts and sticks. And that was my world. You can make your world anywhere and be of that wild world, like birds, as you said, is just shocking to observe animals. You're not yourself. You are that. You're watching the other, and maybe the other becomes you. You're all part of the same.
Yeah, I think one of the lessons that wilderness and nature really teaches us is how to pay attention. And I think that that is one of the real gifts we get, and that we can bring that level of attention to our ordinary life, even if it's in an urban landscape. And I love that you brought in birds, Rob, because my dad always had bird feeders around the windows, and I just grew up learning all the birds and their songs and their names. And this is really important to me. So as a poet, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Olivia.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I also think sometimes the wild finds us no matter where we are. And I think Utah is especially experiencing that right now as the snow melts and we have to negotiate the water. I think we may not consider water to be wild all the time when it's, sitting in a bird feeder or coming out of a faucet. But if we only think of wild as or I should say, if I sometimes think of wild as uncooperative, and I think there's a lot of potentially uncooperative water that is reminding us that all places are wild places, even when it's sometimes cooperating and sometimes not.
I have a few questions from the audience. The first one is, the beauty of nature has been inspiring artists and writers as long as art has existed. How do you keep your writing about nature fresh, knowing how historied the subject is?
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
One thing for me is to, just go back to paying attention. And there's so many things around us that have never been written about. My first chapbook was called A Calendar of Crows. And so it was a chapbook about crows. And, find something that people don't write about much. At the time, people didn't write about crows too much. And, they're bugs. Mary Oliver writes about a grasshopper and the way it moves its jaws back and forth instead of up and down. I mean, by paying attention, you get these new original images just by really focusing and being mindful about what's around us. So I think just paying attention is a big answer to that.
Good point.
And by reading other poets who inspire you. I've already written down notes from things that you all have said today. Michael, you said something about the rhythm of the rowing. Well, the rhythm of the hooves of my horse. I've noticed in some of my poems written on horseback where I just hook the reins over the horn, and write, it goes da 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 versus rowing and dripping, paying attention to other poets. Sorry, Nancy, to cut you off there.
Oh, no, that's fine. I'm glad that you're talking. I was just thinking when, Michael, you were talking about that idea of observation and paying attention. And also to keep things fresh, I think if we give our own perception, then that will make whatever you're writing fresh. Mm-hmm. And to be careful that you're not copying someone else, but your own perception about something.
Yeah, it's kind of a dance between, the external and the internal and how they meet.
Yeah. Yep. Here's another question from the audience. Edward Abbey was afraid that Arches National Park was going to lose its wildness, as it might have to modern backpackers coming in droves and trampling down the trails. Is there still wildness in these national parks to you, even in the modern world, with our cars and our roads cutting through them?
I would say yes. I mean, the road is there, but so is the landscape. Shoot, I grew up in a state, like I said, Washington, which is not the state I grew up in anymore because of expansion, development, sprawl, people. I don't recognize. I mean, I got lost trying to find a golf course in Ording 5 years ago because it was unrecognizable as a golf course. It was surrounded by housing developments. All I was expecting to see was tulip fields, like when I was growing up. They're gone, which sucks. But mountain is still there. And, you know, I love Robinson Jeffers, and he talks about human beings as a crop of suburban houses. All right. And all our works will dissolve. Nature's going to be around longer than we are. And I don't think we have to worry about that. I mean, in the meantime, it'd be better to be, you know, good stewards and caretakers, but we can't end nature. At least I don't think so.
And well, I went backcountry skiing for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I usually just do downhill skiing, but it was just great to be out in the wilderness. But you know, I was like so mad at the snowmobilers, you know, bringing the noise and the pollution and everything, and I certainly think that it can be harder to find the wild sometimes just because of the encroachment of you know, machines and industrial kinds of, you know, more people, more automobiles, more snowmobiles, more, you know, ATVs. But there may be a place for them too. I mean, I do look forward to when the snowmobiles and the ATVs are all electric and like the outdoors are quieter again. You know, I think that's going to happen. But you know, but so I mean, I really, I kind of like the idea of the civil rights worker Loretta J. Ross, who has this concept I'm sure you all have heard of called calling people in rather than calling people out. And I kind of feel like that's what I try to do in my poetry about wilderness, is to kind of like share this reverence and this love that we've talked about, and you know, try to call people in that way, and you know, help you know, just talk about the wilderness as a place of reverence. And I don't know, that may help. I don't know. That's what I try to do.
Back to your question about arches, I think we humans are, just by our sheer numbers, and something about this entitlement of, we figure it's owed us to be able to see that or this and be able to go there. I think the park should be shut down on occasion, keep the people out of there, let it just take a breath, let it restore. People we aren't entitled to see every place. And if we're killing arches by just flattening it, compressing it, making it noisy all the time, whatever, shut it down, limit the number of people going in there. People won't do that voluntarily. Do it for them, and look at it from land needs to be number one. People will take care of themselves. Land needs the protection. But that will never happen.
Thank you, everybody. One more question from the audience. Does Utah have outdoor poetry workshops that happen in nature itself? I'm sure there are. I am not familiar with any outdoor workshops in, you know, this area, but I'm sure in Salt Lake it happens all the time. Do you know of any?
There's one down at Zion. And I know
okay.
that because I got asked to run that workshop. I didn't do it outdoors, but the outdoors is all around you, and there are breaks to go out and be in it and then come back. As for like sitting around outside trying to write, oh, I don't know. I mean, that could be kind of difficult. There are people, you know, who wouldn't be comfortable that way because of age or disability. So, I don't know. I mean, there are places, there are ways, and that one down at Zion is for sure one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that my aunt always used to quote the Quakers, who said that when you have an idea about something that's not really happening, that for this God hath but thee. And so I would just say, if you're interested in workshops in nature, organize one, invite some poets and make it happen. So, yeah.
There's a woman who's been doing it at Great Salt Lake too, right?
I
On
was just about to
Antelope Island.
Yeah, Nan Seymour is having a vigil on the Great Salt Lake and has lots of workshops out there on Antelope Island.
I've done outdoor workshops with Audubon or with the school districts at Red Butte Garden, or poets from the Utah Wilderness Association sitting outside, writing, drawing. I've taken Navajo kids out through a school district program in Blanding, and my prisoners, of course, begged me to take them outside and let's go outside and ride. So you can do little things, but as for organized, I don't know. If probably the weather inclement issue is always a problem for people organizing a formal workshop.
There's one other person in Logan named Star Colebrook you might try to contact, because I think she's taken people to the Bear River Refuge, and I think she's taken people to the wetlands as an event, as a workshop before. I don't know for sure, but her name is Star Colebrook, and she lives in Logan, and she's a good contact, I think.
I don't think she's doing that. I don't think she's doing it anymore right now, but she has done it for the last year or so.
Yeah, she may pick it back up when things settle down. Wonderful. Well, our time is not up yet, but we each of you need to read a poem. And so we're at 12:36. I believe we're over at 12:45. So let's hit it. Please. Let's hear your poetry. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. I'll jump
Okay.
in. This poem is called Reverence. In childhood, we planted impatiens to dress the porch steps, and corn in the upper fields, and sunflowers tucked under the apple trees. We would love them for the numbered days until they had surrendered to the earth again. I am a different kind of little god. I let the white whorehound reseed all over the dust of my backyard. My husband knows better than to pluck them, so he builds them courtyards, bitty wrought iron fencing, and a wind chime here, there a bejeweled yard marker, and a ring of stones. I am surrounded by wild cloisters. I am ever tripping on altars to praise that which has chosen to grow. Thank you.
Very nice. Margaret?
Sure. This is Searching for Circe, like some poem book I just put out. This poem's called Bison. A poem stepped through the pines, tapers lit by lightning, not a lord. His great mane and broad wet back, his pointed horns and small dark eyes, draped with a cape of hailstones, a mantle unmelted, unmoving. I caught his eye from my own distant crossing on the trail his kin had cut through the brush, stirring dust into mud, clinging to fetlocks and swinging black beards. His jaws ground the cud he'd carried from a meadow. Not turning his head, he stood in the woods, night bedded down, pelted with stones of ice and needles, red and dry hangers-on knocked loose from the high prickly canopy, whiskering his snowy robe. His eye held mine, white ice on black lashes, a beast too big to be real.
Great. Yes.
I can read one. So this is from my book, House Under the Moon. This is called November, Hiking with Aiden, 7 months old. Oh, I should mention that there's a word tilak, which is like a word for that mark that Indians put on their third eye. November, hiking with Aiden, 7 months old. You chant koans, mantras, as we reach the canyon cliffs, high above the Bear River, twisting its jade way below, wrinkled and seamed with white. You're startled by thunder, and soon we're in rain and snow. I rig a raincoat shelter under a pine where the ground is littered with needles and hoofprint hearts. I lift you out of your backpack, settle you in my lap as a raindrop smacks you between the eyes, tilak. My stinging hands hold a bottle I kept warm inside my shirt, and you drink your mother's milk. What's this landscape to 7-month eyes? A face of a father, spiraling flakes, silver needles, juniper, perfume, no names. When they pulled you from your mother, you arrived in a wilderness of white. Now we're working to show you how a home might be. Gulping your milk, you gaze into my eyes, and I curl over you, blocking the snow, the bottle, a candle between us.
Really nice.
Thank you.
Okay. This is called The Church of the Stars and the Moon. Of course, they weren't resurrecting, but the mouse I found in the garden one evening dropped by the carrots when my cat got bored, and the dead bird broken in the deck chair. Such a nice spot to stretch out easy while you're thinking, while you're pinning one wing and watching the other one flail. In the morning when I went back to toss them, they were gone. And then I could hear it for certain. A call that wasn't like, whoo, but more like more, more. And so I had an owl, a little piece of neighborhood lightning. I'd swing by the pet store, buy mice to stock the yard, and keep watch, my eyes tuned to shadows. I'd will the street to sit still and be quiet so the owl would let go and glide, carve its arc across the backyard darkness, just a hitch, one moment when the talons clutched, then gone, the best part of summer. I only saw it once, but I found where the bones wound up, always at the base of a telephone pole in the alley behind the garage. I noticed ants one day in their organized scramble. Sure enough, an above ground catacomb, a toss of miniature driftwood, deposit of dead. It probably like the crossbeam, like a long high table with an open view of below, and ate unhurried and ate well, then sat like a messenger angel in the church of the stars and the moon. Don't believe it's impossible. If angels are real, then an angel might be an owl. They do seem to be intercessors, calling out across the empty spaces, their gold eyes filling up zeros, their wings like a bridge, something reaching from up to down, lower to higher, at least for a while. I miss my owl's company. I wish it had stayed all summer. But maybe, like angels, they belong to no one. Maybe wildness is an answer from the sky.
Very nice.
Really.
Those were great. Oh, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. I'm not sure, Lisa, if we have any more time.
I think we're very close to the end.
Okay.
I can either start thanking you now, or if there's one more question you'd like to entertain. But it looks like I think we posted several outdoor opportunities in the chat, that outdoor poetry workshops or writing opportunities. I just really want to say how glad I am that you ended with poems. So beautiful. I
Yeah.
found myself wrapped, and I appreciate all of you for your words and thoughts, and I appreciate all of our attendees. Thank you so much. Please come back for the Poetry as Activism panel, which starts at noon. Thank you, Nancy, for your able moderation, and I appreciate all of you. So see you soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Nancy.
Everybody.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you all.
Everybody.
You too.